From Trimble Construction, you're listening to the Connected Construction Show, where we connect you to the contractors, owners, designers, engineers, and construction professionals who are finding better ways to work. And now, here's your host, Matt Sprauge.
Hello and welcome back to the Connected Construction Show. My name is Matt Sprauge and I am your faithful host here. Back at Dimensions 2022 in Las Vegas, Nevada at the Venetian Resorts. Very excited to be bringing our next guests with you. We have Joe Eberly and David Horesh, both from 4M. Welcome, guys. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having us.
And normal way we run the show, we kind of start off with, let's get to know you, and then we'll dive into the topic of the day. So, Joe, tell us a little bit about yourself. Name,
Sure.
Where are you from? What title is? Where you got to? How you got to where you are today?
Perfect. So thanks, Matt, for having us on the show today. Name is Joe Eberly. I live and work out of the Denver area, so I live just outside of Denver. And I recently joined 4M Analytics. I'm leading the go-to-market team, so the sales and marketing efforts at the organization. And my background, I just coming off of 14 years working with the eBuilder team and, of course, the Trimble team here. So super excited to join you today, and at the same time, super excited to be a part of what 4M Analytics is doing in the market. So thanks again for having us.
Awesome. Welcome. And David, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So first of all, officially, I'd like to welcome Joe. It's great to have him join the team. I'm the director of marketing in the company, based in Tel Aviv, in Israel, which is where most of the company is based at the moment, although we just set up headquarters in the United States, in Austin, Texas. Very excited to be here. Thanks for having us.
Question: why Austin? I'm curious. Where coming from Tel Aviv to the United States, why Austin? What's special about it?
Well, I think there's lots of things that would be interesting about bringing a company to Austin. Obviously, Texas is a big draw right now. There are lots of organizations moving into Texas from all over, not just the United States, but outside the United States as well. It's a very attractive place for talent. So I think just the fact that young folks who are interested in joining companies are navigating towards cities like Austin and maybe Denver and Nashville and some other areas in the United States. So, and as a centrally located place to be, it's a pretty cool city too. So
awesome. And for those of you in Austin, it wasn't that I didn't agree with it. I was just curious. I really like Austin, Texas. So don't unsubscribe. So let's dive in a little bit about 4M. Can you kind of give us like a high-level overview of 4M, and most importantly, kind of at the top level, what problem in the industry are you addressing?
Well, the problem is a big question, but in a nutshell, what we do as a company is we've built the first digital map of subsurface infrastructure, sort of a Google Maps for the subsurface. What this means is that any stakeholder that gets involved with the needs to use utility data can pick a place on the map and see what utilities are buried there. Very much like the Google Maps platform. But regarding the problem, where to start? I think that it's the utility risk is the biggest risk for any construction project because it's the biggest unknown. We just don't know what's below. And today we try to solve this problem using a variety of techniques, whether it's collecting the public and private records, or whether it's helping field investigators, or using sensors, or potholing, and we're making all these efforts that are highly manual, very expensive, and they still don't mitigate the risk. They still don't give us 100% certainty. So I think that's the crux of it.
So what are some of the risks of not knowing the subsurface utilities on a road project as an example.
Yeah. So today, when you want to pave a road or put a pipeline into the ground, you find yourself digging. And when you dig, you often encounter already existing infrastructure that's there. And when I say encounter, it's often damaging them because we're putting a backhoe, we're putting the shovel into the ground, and we're, best case scenario, nobody gets hurt, but worst case scenario, people actually get hurt. And not to mention the schedule overruns and breaching the budget. There's a lot of impact on. There's what's called the first line of impact to the project, which is like people get hurt, we need to move the utility out of the way, we need to fix all that stuff. And then there's the second circle, which is we're closing down a road, we're impacting people's lives, where there's people cut off from a specific utility, and there's all this negative impact that is happening because we don't have clarity on what's happening below the surface.
Okay. That makes sense. I figured like you have knowing what is and what isn't there, right? So it's a matter of, and it's also timing too. It's that if it's a project in North Dakota as an example, and it's October, and you need to move a utility line, you need to do that pretty darn quickly before the road, before the surface, the subsurface freezes, and you can't even get to it. So I imagine in terms of even the planning side of things is understanding when that type of work can get done.
Yeah, I think just to layer in there, I think if you think about the impacts of say hitting an electrical line or a water line or whatever the case might be as you're digging in the ground. Yes, it's an impact to your cost budget and schedule on your project, and it's a disruption to, say, the traffic flow in an area because we need to shut it down to get some repair going and so forth. But even beyond that, the impact to the businesses who may lose power, the homes that may have disruption in their water service, God forbid, we hit a telecommunications line, right? And all of a sudden now we're without internet, and of course we can't function without internet nowadays. So
I'd be mad at you with that.
Yeah, they're like the concentric circles outside of being in the ground at that specific point. They just grow and grow and grow. So it all goes back to the risk of knowing what's underground, and really the vision and the mission that we have as an organization is to ensure that the competence level of what's under the ground where you're digging is known.
Gotcha. So let's kind of like we'll double click down a little bit more on the problem. Subsurface utilities are some of the hardest risk to mitigate throughout the entire project or asset lifecycle. Why is that? Why is it the hardest?
Well, when we think about the challenge of utility data as a title, we divide it into two spaces. Number one is access to utility data. So 3 years before the project, when I'm the first engineer to start putting together the story of this project, I do what's called record research. And what that means is that best case scenario, I go online and I find the GIS platform of the city that I'm working with, and I pull the data from there, or I find some sort of PDF that's on a server that's 20 clicks away. And worst case scenario, it's a hard copy buried in a basement of a building in the outskirts of a town that no one's ever heard of.
Yeah.
Now the question is, and that's the second part of the problem, once I get my hands on that utility data, can I trust it? Is it reliable enough? Did the contractor who put the pipeline into the ground, did he make any last minute changes that he didn't put in the as-built? Or are the as-built with best intentions accurate enough? Those questions, when you look at what's happening in the industry, we know that the human element, when involved with portraying what's happening below the surface, is putting projects at risk, depending on the level of how good or not good they are, right? So these two elements make it very costly and inefficient to also get your hands on utility data and then afterwards trust it.
That makes sense. So even a geography that has, let's say, a GIS usage that has, from their perspective, mapped out all these things. The question still comes: how reliable? Where did it come from? Right? It's still, because they might be going off of some documentation that they put into GIS, so therefore you think it's gospel.
Yeah.
But how do you know? So it's not necessarily just for organizations that don't have this type of thing mapped out yet, but even the ones that do, in terms of another source of another data point to kind of confirm what's going on.
Yeah, I think one of the proof points is yes, there is access to that data, although it's manually or it's a manual process. You can get to it, but to the point that David was making about reliability, there's a reason why there are probably tens or even hundreds of thousands of utility breaks during construction in North America alone over the course of the year, and that of course leads to delays and money and billions of dollars worth of additional cost in some cases. So it goes to what is the confidence level that you can have in what you just described, which is, say, a GIS system that's publicly available, but at some point that data has to get in there, and that process of getting that data collected as a part of the sort of project closeout process, maybe something like that, and the accuracy of it getting into it, but also how updated is it, right? So it's a manual process. Somebody has to go to the sort of city GIS administration group and say, okay, here's the as-built for this new project. Well, what if a project doesn't get submitted? It never shows up on the GIS map. So the reliability, accuracy is one thing, but the reliability and the confidence in the data is something completely different.
There's a very repeatable story that happens in our industry. The two stakeholders, the contractor and the utility owner, meet in a restaurant or in a dark alley, and they pass each other a napkin with some sort of portrayal of the utility data in the project, because people don't want to be liable for the utility data that gets passed between organizations.
Yeah.
Because there's a whole game of who's responsible.
Because if they recorded it incorrectly.
Exactly.
And then they hit it.
Exactly.
Well, it also points to one of the reasons why we see as a vision and a path forward as an organization. There are lots of mapping solutions out there, GIS being one of them, of course. But none of them seem to have really focused in and solved for what the real problem is, right? Which is producing a map that is data ready in near real time, right? With continually update and continual maintenance on the data that goes into that mapping. So you can inject yourself into a process with some technology with an attempt to try to make it more efficient or make it better, or make it easier, make it more accurate, all of those things. But unless you address the process itself, regardless of the technology, you still have a problem of surfacing the problem through your technology. And so what 4M is really attempting to do is take that process, fix what it is that's broken in the process, and bring to bear the latest, greatest mapping technology for the end users.
Okay. So what's the end game? What's the ideal solution? So, tell us, where we are today as an industry, and where does 4M help, or where do they kind of plug in, or not they, you? Go ahead.
There needs to be a single source of truth for the industry. I want you to think about it. So we can, let's say, a random highway in Texas can have a dozen stakeholders working on it for the same time. And they will all do the same process of collecting data, verifying it, and then using it.
So the owner pays for it 12 times.
And that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous also for them, because it's more overhead in their project, more overhead, more risk, more liability. And what we're saying is that there should be one single source of truth, just like the stock exchange is for the financial realm.
Yeah.
What is the reality for the civil long linear infrastructure realm? So the answer is a map that everyone can agree on, because today the funny thing is a utility that's buried beneath the ground is a reality that no one can agree on, because nobody can agree that it's exactly here or it's exactly there, or who's really the owner. We have also cases like that.
Yeah.
So going back to what Joe said, it's really about having one source of truth that's constantly updated, that is a place that people can say, okay, this is what's happening. Now let's discuss. Who's liable for this? Who's liable for that? How can we work together? How can we perform utility coordination, damage prevention, and so on?
Yeah, I think it's, if you think of it from sort of the asset life cycle management process, although it's surely applicable on the front end, planning and design and the engineering stages of projects, but it won't be very long, in my view, right? It won't be very long before we discover where down the life cycle of an asset it'll have further applicability, right? And that's what we're hoping to learn over the next couple of years in partnering with many of the firms that use that type of data to figure out, okay, what does this data do for us later on in the project life cycle? Because ultimately, if you're an owner, it's about the three things: scope, schedule, and budget, right? How can what we do on the front end impact overall the best use of the taxpayers' money as an owner in heavy civil or transportation or water or wherever it might be?
So, yeah, so it was going to be my next question.
Yeah.
It's like where, or not where, when does this become important? And I was curious, like obviously we kind of already talked about like the planning, right? But also where, like, even the operations and maintenance side of it.
Yeah.
And so I think what you're saying is that we will learn more as it starts getting leveraged.
Yeah, I think so, right? I'd like to use the idea of or the words data ready mapping, right? So if you think about if you fix the inefficiencies in the production at the early stages where you're capturing the data, you're combining different data sources and you're presenting that through your platform. That means, and by the way, you have the maintenance of that data and the updating of that data going on at the same time. Now you have what I call data ready mapping, which is applicable along that entire life cycle, not just in the very beginning of the the planning and the design and engineering stages. So a lot we don't know what we don't know yet. There's a lot to learn, right? Like where this can be used, and also for us, how we continue to add additional data sources into, say, our data ocean, that we can turn on different types of layers that can be applicable to different disciplines and different organizations throughout that life cycle.
What happens today in the industry is that we only start investing in acquiring utility data the closer we get to construction. But as every professional knows, the problems you solve on the front end at the early stages are the problems that won't happen when you get to construction.
Yep.
And that doesn't happen with utilities because you don't make that investment, which is a big...
Get some water. There we go. No choking here.
So, because we're making big investments only when we get closer to construction. and that's the real problem.
Yeah, sometimes it's too late.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So I'll get real quick. I'll just give you a personal story. How does this actually relate to something that you as an individual or me as an individual? You know, a couple of years ago, I had a house built. I closed on my house, and we moved in. And about 30 days after we moved in, unfortunately, we started having the sewer system back up into our brand new house. Right, this is terrible. What is going on? Right, so I called the builder. Superintendent came out. He brought a camera, a pipe camera crew out with him. The utility excavator came out. They're all looking at it, trying to figure out what happened. Well, of course, it's a blockage of some kind, somewhere between the drain and the street where we plug in at. So, anyway, after some investigation, they can't figure out exactly where the block is going on there. So, here comes the backhoes. Yeah, got to dig down, and where I live, they're buried down about 20 feet. Right. So, and I have about a 60, 80 foot from the front of my house out to where it would tie into the street, into the sewer main. 20-foot holes, 15 feet wide, 80 feet long.
Had to find it.
Yeah. Tore up my whole land, all my landscaping, everything. Right. Had to move us out. Right. So we couldn't live there while we had no sewer. So
Crazy.
Ultimately, what we found is where the design showed that it would go directly straight out of my house and tie into the street. They decided at some point, without telling anybody, they were going to take it this way and take it over to another perpendicular parallel street, right? And hook it up there. Never updated the plans, never updated the as-built.
Yeah.
And what caused the backup is they never connected it. So it never got actually connected, right? The sad part of it is they never got it actually connected. But to me, it's a perfect example of something on paper did not translate into what got put in the ground, where it needed to be, and the people who did it didn't take the time or didn't do the due diligence to figure out, okay, we need to let somebody know that we deviated from our site plan and put it somewhere else. So, and ultimately it ended up costing my builder about $50,000 to fix it. So, like one time, one house. Right?
That's awful. Yeah. So, what's next for 4M? And which direction is the company heading?
So we've just finished mapping out Texas to create this statewide map. The next state that we're going to be mapping is California. Hopefully it's going to be finished by the end of this year, January, something like that. And hopefully we'll have the whole country by the end of 2023. That's our plan. The way we're doing this, to get a bit into the nitty-gritty, is we have two aspects. I'll explain the story of Texas. So the first thing that we did is we collected the public and private utility records for the entire state. So in Texas, that's about 300,000 records that we digitized. We then determined which are relevant and which aren't, and we put the relevant ones on the map, on the digital interface. Then what we do is we have access to about 60 to 70 years of satellite and aerial imagery. And we've developed computer vision algorithms that are able to scan these databases and look for visual evidence that indicate what's buried beneath the surface. So excavators, project sites are putting pipelines into the ground, scar marks, manholes, valves, and so on and so on. And those indicators are then turned into a map that is overlaid on the public and private records. So there's some sort of QA, QC to the project documents, so to speak. And there's a whole technology-based process behind that. But that's more or less how we build our map. That scale of doing everything, this is all done from the office. No boots on the ground, no field investigators, no GPRs, and so on and so on. And that allows us to create such a map of the entire country because we're able to operate at scale.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, so deviate a little bit here. So this is more of a kind of like industry question. So as a new company, a startup, what other intriguing solutions are you seeing out there that have the potential to be disruptive, or at the very least make an impact? What other type of things are you seeing?
Yeah, I think for me, it's obviously the robotics, right, that are have been sort of a part of the construction, I guess, market for some time now.
Yeah.
I think there's certainly a ton that can be done through the robotic side of it, with as well as the 3D visualization, virtual stuff as well, right? So imagine for a second that you could sort of plug in to our map with some some visuals and like go underground.
Yep.
And see the utility lines and stuff under there. That would be pretty interesting and pretty cool to figure out whether or not something like that can be done. But to me,
So
it's
you mean actually like X-ray?
well, it might be X-ray.
Yeah,
I'm not
right.
sure. Right. X-ray vision.
Not,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
what I mean was that you're not talking about like mixed reality.
No.
You're actually saying like.
Yeah, well, yeah, in the same way that I think 4M is bringing by addressing the problems and the inefficiencies in the processes that are out there today. In the same way that we're sort of innovating that process, right? Who knows what's next, right? You can take it to another thought would be like crowdsourcing the data that goes into a business application like 4M Analytics, like a mapping solution. Right?
Yeah.
So it's almost like, if you can think about Google Maps, what's so interesting about and easy about Google Maps is I can decide on some morning, say, hey, I want to drive from Denver to New Mexico and go to an art exhibit or something like that, right? Type in the address and I'm off and running, right? I can follow it. But imagine that same sort of thing underground, but in today's world, you have to tell Google underground maps that say, here's the streets that I want to take, here's the time it'll take me on each of those streets, here's the distance on each of those streets, and by the way, 30 days later, you'll get your map back, right? That sort of it captures the process as it exists today. But think of anywhere in the United States, draw a polygon, and it exposes not only the utility data to you, but things like who owns the land, the utility owners, the topography, the floodplains, any relevant information that you need as an individual who's working on a future project or a current project or whatever the case might be. So I hate to go out to the bleeding edge of where this could go, right? But I can't help but think about what's just over the horizon. And at the same time, we have to stay focused on what we're here to do immediately, which is have an immediate impact on our industry.
What makes a difference now?
Right. And that's sort of my role now, is to figure out, okay, we need help doing this. We need partners. We need people who are interested that want to come try our technology. And
so I think that's like a really important piece, right? Is that so we have like the connected construction and whatnot, and it's like if every stakeholder waited for the technology to be perfected, it'll never happen. Like the industry needs people to test and adopt and trial and error and provide feedback, and that's one of the most important parts about the whole thing.
Yeah, it's really exciting when you like Texas DOT and Caltrans, right?
Yeah.
These organizations, I really love working with them, right? Because they've got groups of people in there that are very forward thinking and are not afraid to sort of take a step out with maybe a new company like us and say, hey, let's try this, right? Let's spend some time and some resources together, figure out what works, what doesn't work, and we'll take that information back in a very quick shout out, by the way, to our engineering, R&D, and product team. So let me get that in there, right? They're doing some incredible things with AI and just some of the stuff they do. I don't even get it, right? So, but that's the kind of thing that we're looking for, is that engagement model, so we can share what we think we can bring to the industry in terms of the return on investment or the value or driving down costs, whatever it happens to be. So, in the next 6 months, let's say I'm looking really for partnerships in the industry that we can go try some things out.
So it was our keynote speaker yesterday, or one of Steve Wozniak. He said every organization should have a CDO, a Chief Disruption Officer.
Right.
And he actually one other point of clarification is that person should not report to the CEO.
Yeah,
right.
And I heard him say that.
I loved it. And it is true. It's just like you have to have someone who's solely focused on pushing the boundaries and see what's going on. And I would say it's not just for technology companies. It's for our customers as well.
Yeah.
Is that they need to be figuring out like how they can push it, because they might get a hold of what 4M is doing, and all of a sudden use it in a different way that you never thought of.
Exactly.
Like, oh my goodness. Like and then it truly becomes super disruptive, and it's only happening. Connected construction only happens when people are participating. So.
Yeah, in the world of where it's pretty common for people to use the trusted advisor kind of statement, I don't like that. Or like, we need to be trusted disruptors, to your point, right? Come in, have an honest conversation about where the pain is, where you're hemorrhaging money or time or scope of schedule, whatever the case might be. And let's go out and try something, because we think we can have an impact on it. So, by the way, if you think about that whole life cycle of an asset through the construction phase and everything else, right? It's everybody that has some level of success, whether you're a service provider, your technology provider, whether you're a backhoe operator, whatever it is, it's those incremental areas where if you don't raise your hand and say, hey, I have an idea, or this is an issue, I think I know a company, or I know somebody that can help us out here, you're going to run into it the next time you do it, and the next time you do it.
Yeah. So my son's 16 years old, and right now he's just infatuated with, out of the blue, coming up with the next like big thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes, that's possible that you can randomly figure out what the new sliced bread is. But most of the time it comes from experience. So I'm trying to teach him that, like, go experience different things, but have a lens of what's, a problem that everybody's just okay with and look to solve it.
100%.
Yeah. So last question. Question we ask everybody. What is your motto, or what's a motto that you've heard that you feel kind of brings a nice life lesson? Who wants to go first?
Bit of a military essence to it, but improvise, adapt, overcome.
Improvise, adapt. I love it. That's exactly what we were just talking about, right?
Yeah,
perfect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Joe?
Well, kind of along the same lines as David, mine comes from some experience I had in the military. I was a troubleshooter on the flight deck of an aircraft carrier. My job is to go out there quickly, find what's wrong, and find a fix to it. Otherwise, flight operations stop. And when flight operations stop, somebody's losing their job.
Yeah.
Right? So, and I learned along that way, we had a captain of our ship that used to end everything with press on. And so for years, I've been using that as a motto for myself and the teams that I work with, of press on. So, yeah.
I love it. Guys, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation.
Yeah,
it's been fantastic. For everybody listening, watching, thank you so much. And as always, until next time, stay connected.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Connected Construction Show. For more information, visit us at connectedconstructionshow.com.